Lieutenant Commander Olivia Mitchell's hands moved with surgical precision as she calibrated the targeting system of the Mk-48 Torpedo. Her dark hair was tightly secured in a regulation bun, not a strand out of place despite 18 hours on duty. The fluorescent lights of USS Barracuda's weapons bay cast harsh shadows across her focused face, but nothing could break her concentration on the delicate calibrations that might one day save American lives. If only the rest of the submarine's crew showed the same respect for her expertise as she did for these weapons. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Need a man to double-check your math there, Mitchell? The voice belonged to Executive Officer James Harrington, a towering figure whose broad shoulders seemed perpetually tensed when in her presence. His words dripped with the kind of condescension that had become as familiar to Olivia as the metallic taste of recycled submarine air. She didn't flinch. 3 years as the only female weapons officer in the Pacific Fleet's elite submarine force had taught her to swallow responses that would have gotten her disciplinary action. Instead, she continued her methodical examination of the torpedo guidance system, her calloused fingers finding flaws that others had missed. "Maybe you're better suited to communications or navigation," Harrington continued, his voice carrying to the other officers in the cramped weapons bay. Something less technical. The laughter that followed was sharp and designed to cut deep. Olivia's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She'd graduated first in her class at Annapolis, completed the Navy's most rigorous weapons specialist training with record scores, and earned commendations for innovative targeting solutions during 3 high-risk deployments. But somehow, this daily humiliation felt like a different kind of warfare. One where her credentials were useless. The torpedo before her was showing anomalous readings, probably from improper maintenance during the last inspection cycle. Without even running a complete diagnostic, she could already identify 3 separate malfunctions. The guidance system showed alignment drift. The propulsion regulator had pressure fluctuations, and someone had clearly miscalibrated the depth sensors. But voicing these observations would only invite more mockery. "Earth to Mitchell," Harrington's voice boomed again. "We don't have all day. The captain wants operational status on all weapons before we reach the exercise zone." As Olivia reached for her tablet to document the findings, her sleeve rode up slightly. For just a moment, the edge of an unusual scar became visible on her wrist. Harrington was mid-sentence when he caught sight of it, his words dying in his throat like a radio suddenly cut to static. But the moment passed too quickly. Olivia tugged her sleeve back down, and Harrington's verbal assault resumed as if nothing had happened. The other officers hadn't noticed their XO's brief hesitation, too busy enjoying their morning entertainment at her expense. What they didn't know was that Lieutenant Commander Olivia Mitchell had once been someone else entirely, someone whose real name was classified in Pentagon files, and whose call sign had become legend among those who operated in the most dangerous naval missions. 5 years ago, she'd been Lieutenant Olivia Reese, known in certain circles as Phantom, the first woman to complete the Navy's most classified underwater weapons program. Now she was just another submarine officer, invisible by choice, spending her days maintaining the weapons systems that kept America's underwater fleet lethal and effective. She had chosen this existence deliberately, trading recognition for anonymity, accolades for the simple satisfaction of ensuring that no submarine crew would ever die because their weapons failed them. The calluses on her hands told a story she'd never voice. They were in the wrong places for someone who'd only ever been a standard weapons officer. Between her thumb and forefinger, she bore the marks of someone who'd spent thousands of hours working with experimental underwater munitions. Along her palms, smooth scars from handling caustic materials during weapons development. On her forearms, faint burn marks from an underwater detonation test gone wrong. These were the hands of someone who'd lived developing cutting-edge weapons, not just maintaining standard-issue torpedoes. Done. Olivia finished her initial assessment and stood slowly, her movements economical and controlled. The torpedo needs a complete recalibration. Guidance system is off by 3 degrees, propulsion shows pressure irregularities, and the depth sensors need to be reset to factory settings. Harrington's response was predictable. "Lucky guess. Anyone could see this thing's been sitting dormant for months." But there was something different in his voice now. A note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. As the officers dispersed to their various stations for the upcoming training exercise, Olivia began the methodical process of breaking down the torpedo's guidance system. Each component told her a story, how it had been used, maintained, and adjusted incorrectly. She worked with the focused intensity of someone performing surgery, because in her mind, that's exactly what this was. Every weapon she serviced might be the difference between life and death for the 87 souls aboard the Barracuda. Every torpedo she recalibrated carried the weight of a promise she'd made 5 years ago in the South China Sea, kneeling beside 3 flag-draped coffins. The promise that no one else would die on her watch. Across the weapons bay, Captain Sandra Reynolds observed her weapons officer with growing curiosity. Something about Mitchell's diagnostic technique triggered memories she couldn't quite place. These weren't skills taught in standard Navy training programs. They were learned through specialized experience that came only from the most classified weapons development programs. Reynolds had served long enough to recognize the signs. The way Mitchell maintained perfect awareness of her surroundings even when focused on complex technical tasks. How her eyes constantly tracked movement around the weapons bay. The subtle tension in her shoulders when sonar announced nearby vessels, not from fear, but from the muscle memory of someone who'd operated in hostile waters. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Most telling of all was the way she'd handled that torpedo. Not like a technician examining equipment, but like a creator reconnecting with her invention. As Olivia worked, completely absorbed in her task, she had no idea that her carefully constructed anonymity was about to crumble. The scar hidden beneath her sleeve was more than just a reminder of past injuries. It was a marker of her involvement in the Navy's most secretive weapons development program, a testament to sacrifices that still haunted her dreams. In the control room of the Barracuda, another figure watched the submarine's security feed with protective intensity. Commander Thomas Chen had been serving as the vessel's strategic officer for 3 months, maintaining his own cover as he monitored operations. Like Olivia, he'd chosen a position below his qualifications. But his reasons were different. He was there to watch over a colleague whose work had revolutionized underwater warfare. The Phantom of the Deep wasn't as alone as she thought. But some secrets are too powerful to stay buried forever. And the reckoning that had been building for 5 years was about to begin. Harrington's cruelty had awakened something in Olivia that she'd tried to suppress. The weapons developer, who'd never really disappeared, only learned to hide. The question wasn't whether her true identity would be revealed, but what would happen when it was. In a world where respect was earned through expertise and innovation, Olivia Mitchell was about to discover that some phantoms are too revolutionary for even the Navy to ignore. The submarine continued its silent journey toward the multinational exercise zone. But for Olivia, the real battle was just beginning. Executive Officer James Harrington had made Lieutenant Commander Mitchell his personal project, and everyone on the submarine knew it. At 6'2" and built like a heavyweight boxer, he'd constructed his reputation on the belief that women compromised the operational effectiveness of combat vessels, particularly submarines. His morning briefings now included pointed comments about maintaining standards and remembering what real submariners look like. Olivia had become his favorite target, and he'd elevated the harassment to an art form. "Mitchell!" Harrington's voice echoed through the narrow corridor as Olivia made her way to the mess hall. "Your torpedo diagnostics were incomplete." Again, the assignment that followed was intentionally humiliating. Inventory duty in the submarine's smallest storage compartment, while other officers prepared for the upcoming exercise. Olivia accepted the task with the same mechanical precision she applied to everything else, her face betraying nothing of the storm brewing beneath the surface. "Make sure those supply counts are accurate to the last paperclip, Mitchell. That's about your speed, isn't it?" Harrington's laughter echoed through the vessel, joined by the nervous chuckles of junior officers who were grateful not to be in his crosshairs. What Harrington didn't realize was that every degrading task, every cruel comment, every moment of public humiliation was being cataloged by someone who'd spent years learning to analyze and calculate under extreme pressure. Olivia's silence wasn't submission, it was reconnaissance. As she meticulously counted supplies in the cramped compartment, She studied the submarine's command structure with the same intensity she'd once applied to weapons design. Harrington's authority came from his position and the fear he inspired, but authority built on intimidation always had weak points. Olivia just had to find them. The other officers followed Harrington's lead with increasing confidence. They'd question her calculations, make jokes about diversity quotas, and openly wonder how she'd made it through officer training. Through it all, Olivia maintained her steady silence, completing each task with the kind of attention to detail that had once made her legendary in naval weapons development circles. But Harrington noticed something that bothered him more than he cared to admit. When Mitchell worked on the weapons systems, she handled them with an intimacy that seemed wrong for a standard weapons officer. Her movements were too confident, too certain. She never referenced technical manuals or asked for clarification. It was the difference between someone who'd studied weapons design and someone who'd created weapons from scratch. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning when Harrington arrived with a prototype torpedo that had been sent for the upcoming exercise. He'd spent the previous evening studying its technical specifications, creating what he thought would be an impossible diagnostic challenge. "Attention, everyone," he announced, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a predator who'd cornered his prey. "Let's have ourselves a little skills assessment. Mitchell here thinks she's a weapons expert. Let's see if she can diagnose this prototype's specifications." He set the weapon on her workbench with excessive force, the sound echoing through the suddenly quiet weapons bay. "Take your time. We all know technical analysis isn't your strong suit." Olivia picked up the technical readout, and something fundamental shifted in her demeanor. The change was subtle but unmistakable, like a sleeper agent being activated by a code word. Her hands moved over the weapon specifications with the kind of certainty that came from intimate knowledge of its design. Without running a single simulation, without even accessing the full technical documentation, she began her analysis. Mark 50 ADCAP variant, modified with experimental guidance system using quantum positioning, she said, her voice steady and professional. Propulsion shows experimental hydrogen fuel cell technology rather than standard auto fuel. Warhead casing modified for deep water pressure compensation. Noise signature reduced by approximately 60% compared to standard models. She paused, setting the specifications down with deliberate care. There's also an integrated countermeasure system that isn't documented here, likely using acoustic decoys that deploy automatically when the torpedo detects defensive measures. This isn't just a prototype, it's a complete redesign of underwater weapons technology. Quote, "The weapons bay fell silent except for the hum of the submarine's ventilation systems." Harrington's face had gone pale, then red with embarrassment and rage. She'd identified features that weren't even included in the briefing materials he'd been given. Lucky guesses. He managed, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. The other officers exchanged glances, some looking impressed despite themselves, others uncomfortable with the shift in dynamics. Harrington's response was to escalate to personal attacks. "You're one of those women who memorizes technical jargon to sound important," he said, his voice rising with each word. "Playing at being a weapons expert, because you couldn't make it in the real Navy." For the first time since joining the Barracuda, Olivia's carefully controlled mask slipped. Her jaw tightened, and her left hand closed around a calibration tool with enough force to whiten her knuckles. For a moment, something dangerous flashed in her eyes, a glimpse of the weapons developer she'd been before choosing anonymity. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Olivia's breathing changed, becoming controlled and measured in a way that made Harrington's survival instincts scream warnings he didn't understand. She shifted her weight almost imperceptibly, but suddenly he was looking at someone entirely different. The tool in her hand wasn't just equipment anymore. It was a weapon, and everyone in the room could feel it. For 3 heartbeats, Harrington stood inches from a woman who could have ended his career with a single revelation about her past. Other officers sensed the shift without understanding it. Some primitive part of their brains recognized the presence of someone who operated on a different level, and they found themselves stepping back without conscious thought. But then, as quickly as it had come, the moment passed. Olivia released the tool with visible effort, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of a confrontation that had been perfectly anticipated and then deliberately aborted. She returned to documenting the torpedo's specifications with mechanical precision, but everyone had felt it. Power had entered the room and chosen restraint. Across the weapons bay, Captain Reynolds watched with growing certainty. She'd seen that particular transformation before, during a classified briefing at the Pentagon, when a slight figure had materialized from the background to correct an admiral about advanced propulsion systems. Reynolds pulled out her secure tablet and began accessing classified databases. Her search parameters were specific: female weapons development personnel, call sign Phantom, project history between 2018 and 2022. The results were heavily redacted, but one thing was clear: the woman calibrating torpedoes was no ordinary weapons officer. She was someone who'd operated at the highest levels of naval weapons development, someone whose very existence was classified. As Reynolds studied Olivia with new eyes, she noticed other details that formed a pattern. The way she maintained perfect situational awareness, even while focused on technical tasks. How she positioned herself to keep multiple exit routes available. The subtle scars on her hands that spoke of development accidents. Most telling of all was the way she'd handled Harrington's provocation. Lesser officers would have either cowered or exploded. Olivia had done neither. She'd calculated, assessed, and then chosen restraint. That kind of control came from years of operating in situations where the wrong move meant catastrophic failure. Reynolds. Investigation was interrupted by a communication from Fleet Command. The submarine's orders had changed. Instead of participating in the scheduled exercise, the Barracuda was being diverted to monitor unusual activity near disputed waters. Chinese naval vessels had been behaving erratically, and intelligence suggested they might be testing new underwater technologies. The captain's attention remained fixed on Olivia, who had gone completely still at the announcement of their new orders. For someone trying to remain invisible, she was about to face the greatest test of her carefully constructed anonymity. The confrontation was approaching, and the Phantom of the Deep was running out of places to hide. Harrington, still smarting from his public humiliation, was already planning his next move. If Lieutenant Commander Mitchell thought she'd won this round, she had another thing coming. He'd find a way to break her, to expose whatever weakness kept her silent and compliant. What he didn't know was that his campaign of harassment was about to collide with forces far beyond his understanding. The woman he'd been tormenting wasn't just another officer. She was someone whose true identity could reshape everything they thought they knew about naval warfare, innovation, and what it meant to serve in silence. The reckoning was coming, and when it arrived, nothing would ever be the same. That evening, as the submarine changed course toward its new assignment, Olivia sat alone in the small workspace she'd been allocated. On her tablet, she reviewed classified information about Chinese naval developments that shouldn't have been accessible to a standard weapons officer. Her expression remained neutral, but behind her calm exterior, her mind was racing. The activity they were being sent to monitor wasn't random. It matched patterns she'd helped identify during her time in weapons development, signatures of a new class of underwater drone technology that could potentially neutralize America's submarine advantage. If her suspicions were correct, the Barracuda was sailing into a situation far more dangerous than a routine monitoring mission. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Captain Reynolds stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell," she said formally. "A word in private." Olivia followed the captain to her quarters, the smallest private space on the submarine but still a luxury compared to the shared accommodations of most crew members. Reynolds secured the door and activated a small device that created a low-level interference field, standard procedure for sensitive conversations that shouldn't be overheard. "I know who you are," Reynolds said without preamble. "I know about Phantom." Olivia's expression didn't change, but her posture shifted subtly into a defensive stance. "Captain, I'm not sure what you're referring to." 5 years ago, you led the Navy's most advanced weapons development team," Reynolds continued, ignoring the denial. "Your work on acoustic targeting systems revolutionized underwater warfare. Then, after the South China Sea incident, you disappeared from the program. Officially, Lieutenant Olivia Reese was reassigned to administrative duties. Unofficially, you became Lieutenant Commander Olivia Mitchell and requested assignment to active submarine duty." The silence between them stretched for several seconds before Olivia finally spoke. "How long have you known?" "I suspected since you came aboard. I confirmed it today." Reynolds leaned against her desk. What I don't know is why one of the most brilliant weapons developers in Navy history is hiding on my submarine, enduring harassment she could end with a single phone call. Olivia's carefully maintained control cracked slightly. You've read my file. You know what happened. I know the official report. 3 researchers killed during a test failure. Project suspended pending investigation. Reynolds' voice softened. What I don't know is your side of the story. For a moment, Olivia seemed to be weighing her options. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of memories she'd tried to bury. We were developing a new class of autonomous torpedoes, weapons that could think, adapt, and make targeting decisions without human intervention. The potential was revolutionary, reducing response times from minutes to milliseconds, allowing our submarines to engage multiple targets simultaneously. She moved to the small porthole that offered a view of the endless dark water outside. I designed the guidance systems. Marcus Chen created the propulsion. Eliza Torres developed the autonomous decision matrices. We were months ahead of schedule, exceeding every performance metric. What went wrong? Reynolds asked quietly. Politics, budget concerns, institutional resistance to autonomous weapons systems. Olivia's voice hardened. Our funding was cut. We were ordered to demonstrate results immediately or face project termination. So we pushed too hard, cut corners we shouldn't have. Her hands trembled slightly as she continued. The test was supposed to be controlled. A simple demonstration of the targeting system in a controlled environment. But someone changed the parameters. The weapon identified our research vessel as a target. Marcus, Eliza, and David Rodriguez died, trying to shut it down manually. And you survived, Reynolds said, her voice neutral. I survived because they locked me in the control room when they realized what was happening. Olivia's voice cracked. I watched them die on the monitor while trying to override the system. By the time I succeeded, it was too late. The captain was quiet for a long moment. The official investigation found equipment failure. No one was held responsible. That's because I accepted full responsibility. Olivia turned to face Reynolds directly. I was team leader. The failure was mine, regardless of who changed the parameters. After the investigation, I requested reassignment. I wanted to understand the real-world applications of the weapons I'd been developing. I wanted to see firsthand what it meant to trust your life to technology. And Harrington? Why endure his harassment? Olivia's smile was bitter. Because compared to watching your friends die while you sit safely behind bulletproof glass, a few cruel comments seem insignificant. Reynolds studied her weapons officer with new understanding. Our new orders aren't coincidental, are they? You know something about the Chinese activity. I have suspicions. Olivia hesitated before continuing. The movement patterns match testing protocols for a new class of underwater drones, technology that could potentially detect and target submarines without human intervention. Similar to what we were developing, but with fewer ethical constraints. Why haven't you shared this information? Because explaining how I recognize the patterns would mean revealing who I really am. Olivia met the captain's gaze directly. I chose anonymity for a reason, Captain. The moment my identity becomes known, the questions start again. The investigations. The accusations. Reynolds considered this information carefully. We're sailing into potentially hostile waters, Lieutenant Commander. If your expertise could help keep this vessel and crew safe, I need to know now. I'll do whatever is necessary to protect this submarine, Olivia said firmly, but I'd prefer to do it without exposing my past. That may not be possible. The captain's voice was gentle but firm. Sometimes the only way to move forward is to face what's behind you. As their conversation ended, neither woman realized that their private discussion had not been entirely secure. Outside the captain's quarters, Executive Officer Harrington stood with a puzzled expression. The interference device had blocked most of the conversation, but fragments had come through, enough to pique his curiosity and fuel his resentment. Mitchell was hiding something important, something that gave her special knowledge about their current mission, and Harrington was determined to find out what it was, even if it meant crossing lines he'd previously respected. The submarine continued its silent journey toward what might be a routine monitoring mission, or a confrontation that would test everyone aboard in ways they couldn't imagine. For Olivia, The walls of her carefully constructed identity were beginning to crumble, and the ghosts of her past were rising to the surface once more. Captain Reynolds had a submarine to command and a potential threat to assess, but she also had a weapons officer whose expertise might be the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The question wasn't whether to use that expertise, but how to do so without destroying the woman who possessed it. The next morning, as the Barracuda approached the coordinates where Chinese naval activity had been detected, Olivia found herself summoned to a briefing with the senior officers. The small conference room was already crowded when she arrived, with Captain Reynolds at the head of the table and Executive Officer Harrington looking unusually smug. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, the captain acknowledged her with a nod. "We've received updated intelligence on the Chinese vessels in the area. I'd like your assessment of their capabilities." Harrington's smile widened, "Especially since you seem to have special insight into Chinese naval technology." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Olivia. She maintained her composure, but internally, alarm bells were ringing. Harrington's comment suggested he knew something or thought he did about her past. "I have standard training in recognizing foreign naval capabilities," she replied cautiously. "Nothing special." "Strange," Harrington said, his voice dripping with false concern. "I could have sworn I heard the captain mention your expertise with experimental weapons systems, particularly autonomous underwater weapons." Captain Reynolds intervened smoothly. "Executive Officer Harrington, Lieutenant Commander Mitchell has been asked to provide her professional assessment based on the intelligence available to all officers. Let's stay focused on the mission." The rebuke was clear, but Harrington's expression suggested the matter was far from settled. Throughout the briefing, he watched Olivia with predatory intensity, waiting for any slip that might confirm his suspicions. The intelligence itself was concerning. 4 Chinese vessels had formed a search pattern in international waters near a disputed undersea resource zone. Sonar had detected unusual acoustic signatures that didn't match known Chinese submarine or torpedo profiles. "Based on the search pattern and acoustic signature," Olivia said carefully, "they appear to be testing some form of underwater detection system. The movements suggest coordinated operations, possibly with unmanned underwater vehicles." "And the risk to our vessel?" Captain Reynolds asked. "Moderate to high," Olivia replied, choosing her words with precision. "If these are advanced detection systems, our standard evasion protocols may be insufficient." Harrington leaned forward. "And how exactly would you know that, Lieutenant Commander? That assessment goes beyond the intelligence we've been provided." "It's a logical extrapolation based on the search patterns," Olivia countered, maintaining her professional demeanor. "Any experienced weapons officer would draw similar conclusions." The tension in the room was palpable as Harrington and Olivia locked eyes across the table. Captain Reynolds ended the standoff by assigning preparation duties for potential engagement scenarios. As the officers filed out, Harrington deliberately bumped Olivia's shoulder. "I'm watching you, Mitchell," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "Whatever you're hiding, I'm going to find it." The submarine continued its approach, maintaining a safe distance while gathering intelligence on the Chinese vessels. The crew settled into a heightened state of alertness, preparing for extended surveillance operations. But beneath the professional routine, a current of tension ran through the command structure. Olivia worked methodically in the weapons bay, ensuring all systems were at optimal readiness. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, but her mind was racing, calculating probabilities and running scenarios. If her suspicions about the Chinese technology were correct, standard defensive measures would be insufficient. They needed something more, something the Chinese wouldn't be expecting. Her thoughts were interrupted when Commander Chen, the strategic officer, entered the weapons bay. He waited until they were alone before speaking. "They're using your technology, aren't they?" he asked quietly. Olivia froze, her hand hovering over a torpedo guidance system. "What did you say?" "The Chinese. They're testing a version of the autonomous targeting system you developed." Chen's voice was matter-of-fact. "That's why you recognize the patterns. That's why you're concerned." She turned to face him, her expression guarded. "How would you know about that?" "Because I was assigned to monitor the aftermath of the South China Sea incident." Chen's expression softened. "I know what really happened, Dr. Reese. I know you weren't responsible." The use of her former title and name hit Olivia like a physical blow. For 5 years, no one had addressed her as Dr. Reese, the brilliant weapons developer whose work had revolutionized underwater warfare before tragedy struck. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but the denial lacked conviction. "We don't have time for this," Chen said urgently. "Intelligence suggests the Chinese have developed a working version of your autonomous targeting system. They're using this exercise to test its capabilities in real-world conditions. If I'm right, this submarine and everyone aboard is in danger." Olivia's professional mask cracked further. If that's true, why hasn't naval intelligence issued warnings? Why send a single submarine into a potentially hostile situation? Because officially, your project never existed. Chen's voice dropped lower. After the incident, everything was classified at the highest levels. The Navy couldn't admit they were developing autonomous weapons systems capable of making kill decisions without human intervention. The implications were staggering. If the Chinese had successfully developed what her team had been working on, they could potentially neutralize America's submarine advantage, the cornerstone of Pacific naval strategy for decades. "I need to speak with the captain," Olivia said, her decision made immediately. As they turned to leave the weapons bay, they found Executive Officer Harrington standing in the doorway, his expression a mixture of triumph and disgust. "I knew it," he said, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a hunter who'd finally cornered his prey. "You're not just another diversity hire, you're hiding something much bigger." Before either Olivia or Chen could respond, the submarine's alert system activated. The captain's voice came over the intercom, tense but controlled. "All hands to battle stations. Multiple underwater contacts approaching at high speed. This is not a drill." The moment of reckoning had arrived, but not in the way any of them had anticipated. As Olivia raced to her station, one thought dominated her mind. The weapon she'd helped create might now be targeting the very submarine she had sworn to protect. The ghosts of her past weren't just memories anymore. They were physical threats closing in from the depths. The Barracuda's command center transformed instantly as the crew responded to battle stations. Displays illuminated with tactical information, communications channels cleared for essential traffic only, and weapons systems moved to standby status. Captain Reynolds stood at the center of controlled chaos, her voice steady as she issued commands. "Sonar! Report contacts. Multiple high-speed underwater targets, Captain, not matching any known torpedo profiles. Approaching from multiple vectors at approximately 80 knots. 80 knots. The number sent a chill through Olivia as she took her position at the weapons console. Standard torpedoes couldn't maintain that speed. Only her experimental designs had achieved such velocity in controlled tests. Evasive maneuvers. Reynolds ordered, "Launch countermeasures." The submarine began a steep dive while releasing acoustic decoys designed to confuse incoming torpedoes. Under normal circumstances, these standard defensive measures would be sufficient to evade attack. But as Olivia watched the tactical display, her worst fears were confirmed. The incoming weapons adjusted their course, ignoring the decoys completely. They were tracking the submarine with unprecedented precision, cutting through the water at speeds that shouldn't have been possible. These weren't conventional weapons. They were autonomous hunter-killers using technology she had helped pioneer. "Countermeasures ineffective," reported the sonar operator, tension evident in his voice. "Target still approaching, impact in 45 seconds. Executive Officer Harrington moved to the weapon station. Launch defensive torpedoes, full spread." "Belay that order," Olivia said, her voice cutting through the tension in the command center. All eyes turned to her, including Harrington's furious gaze. "These aren't conventional weapons," she continued, addressing the captain directly. "They're using autonomous targeting algorithms with predictive response patterns. Standard defensive measures won't work. They'll anticipate conventional countertactics." "And you know this how?" Harrington demanded. Captain Reynolds made a split-second decision. "Explain quickly, Mitchell." "Because I designed the prototype these weapons are based on." The admission hung in the air as Olivia's fingers flew across her console, accessing systems that should have been beyond her authority level. "The Chinese have replicated autonomous targeting technology that I developed 5 years ago." Understanding dawned on Reynolds' face. "What do you need?" "Access to the prototype torpedo Harrington brought aboard yesterday. It has systems that can counteract these weapons, but I need to modify the targeting parameters. Olivia's voice was clipped, professional, every word carrying the authority of the weapons developer she'd once been. "Impact in 30 seconds, called the sonar operator. "Give her whatever she needs," Reynolds ordered, silencing Harrington's objection with a sharp gesture. "Now!" The next 20 seconds transformed the command center as Olivia Mitchell disappeared completely, replaced by Dr. Olivia Reese, the brilliant weapons developer who had once revolutionized underwater warfare. Her fingers moved across the console with blinding speed, accessing systems and modifying parameters that no standard weapons officer should have understood. "I'm overriding the safety protocols on the prototype," she explained as she worked, reconfiguring it to emit a specific electromagnetic pulse sequence that will disrupt their guidance systems. "Impact in 15 seconds. The sonar operator announced, his voice steady despite the impending threat. "Almost there," Olivia muttered, her focus absolute as she completed the final modifications. "Firing solution ready." Captain Reynolds didn't hesitate. Fire. The modified prototype torpedo launched with a barely perceptible shudder. On the tactical display, it appeared as a single point of light moving to intercept the incoming threats. But unlike conventional weapons, it didn't aim directly at the enemy torpedoes. Instead, it positioned itself at a precise point in their approach vector and detonated. There was no explosion in the conventional sense. No shock wave, no fireball. Just a precisely calibrated electromagnetic pulse that rippled through the water in a complex pattern. For 3 heartbeats, nothing seemed to happen. Then, one by one, the incoming weapons began to falter. Their movements became erratic. Their speed dropped precipitously. And finally, they began to sink harmlessly toward the ocean floor. "All hostile torpedoes neutralized," reported the sonar operator, disbelief evident in his voice. They're just shutting down." The command center erupted in relieved exclamations, but Olivia remained focused on her console. "The Chinese vessels will know their weapons failed. They'll be analyzing the electromagnetic signature to understand what happened." "Let them," Captain Reynolds said firmly. "Right now, we need to withdraw to a safe distance and report this encounter to Fleet Command." As the submarine began its tactical retreat, the captain turned to Olivia. "I believe you have a complete explanation to provide, Dr. Reese." The use of her real title in front of the entire command crew confirmed what Olivia had feared. Her carefully constructed anonymity was gone. The secret she'd maintained for 5 years had been exposed by the very weapons she'd helped create. But as she looked around at the faces of the crew, people who would have died if not for her specialized knowledge, she realized that perhaps anonymity wasn't what she needed after all. Perhaps what she needed was acknowledgement, not of her brilliance but of her humanity, her mistakes, her growth, and her determination to protect rather than simply destroy. "Yes, Captain," she replied, straightening to her full height. "I do have an explanation. And it's time everyone heard it." Executive Officer Harrington stood nearby, his expression unreadable. The man who had spent months trying to break her spirit was now witnessing her moment of greatest strength. The reckoning had arrived, but not in the way either of them had expected. As the Barracuda continued its withdrawal from the engagement zone, one thing was clear to everyone aboard. The quiet weapons officer they'd underestimated had just saved every life on the submarine. And the story of how she'd done it would change underwater warfare forever. The command center fell silent as Olivia prepared to explain her past. Captain Reynolds cleared non-essential personnel, leaving only the senior officers to hear the full story. The atmosphere was tense, but respectful. They had all witnessed her save their lives with skills far beyond what any of them possessed. "My real name is Dr. Olivia Reese," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of 5 years of secrecy. "Until 5 years ago, I led the Navy's most classified weapons development program, Project Poseidon. We were developing autonomous underwater weapon systems that could identify, track, and neutralize threats without human intervention." She pulled up technical schematics on the main display, designs that made even the most experienced officers in the room lean forward in surprise. The sophistication was years beyond anything they'd seen in service. These weapons could think, adapt, and make targeting decisions in milliseconds. They could distinguish between civilian and military vessels, coordinate attacks from multiple vectors, and defeat standard countermeasures. Her fingers moved across the console, highlighting key systems. We were developing technology that would have maintained American naval superiority for decades. Executive Officer Harrington found his voice. If this program was so successful, why hasn't it been deployed? And why are you hiding on a submarine instead of leading it? Olivia's expression darkened. Because 3 of the finest people I've ever known died during a demonstration test: Marcus Chen, Eliza Torres, and David Rodriguez. The names carried weight, even 5 years later. The official report listed it as equipment failure. The truth was more complicated. Captain Reynolds nodded for her to continue. We were under immense pressure to show results. Budget constraints, political concerns about autonomous weapons. The program was at risk of being shut down. During what should have been a routine demonstration, the targeting parameters were altered. The system identified our research vessel as hostile and launched an attack. Her hands trembled slightly as she continued. Marcus, Eliza, and David tried to abort manually. They locked me in the control room while they attempted to shut down the prototype. I watched on monitors as they died, trying to prevent the weapon from attacking nearby vessels. The command center was utterly silent. Even Harrington seemed affected by the raw pain in her voice. I managed to override the system, but too late to save them. The investigation that followed was quick and conclusive. Equipment failure, no individual responsibility assigned. The program was suspended indefinitely. But you weren't responsible, Commander Chen spoke up. The targeting parameters were changed by someone else. Olivia's smile was bitter. I was team leader. The ultimate responsibility was mine. After the investigation, I requested reassignment. I wanted to understand the real-world implications of the weapons I developed. I wanted to see firsthand what it meant to trust your life to technology that could think for itself. So you buried Dr. Olivia Reese and became Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, Captain Reynolds said quietly. Yes. I changed my name legally, accepted a reduction in rank, and requested assignment to active submarine duty. For 5 years I've served without incident. Until today, Harrington said, when the Chinese deployed weapons based on your technology. Olivia nodded grimly. They've been developing their own version of Project Poseidon. What we encountered were prototype autonomous torpedoes. Not as advanced as what we were developing, but dangerous enough. They're learning, testing their capabilities in real-world conditions. Captain Reynolds studied the tactical display, where the neutralized Chinese weapons were still visible as inert objects on the ocean floor. And you knew how to counter them because you designed the original technology. The electromagnetic pulse sequence I programmed into our prototype torpedo was specifically designed to disrupt the guidance algorithms I developed. It was a failsafe we built into our systems. A kill switch, essentially. A kill switch the Chinese wouldn't know about, Chen observed. Exactly. They replicated our technology but missed crucial safety protocols we had incorporated. Olivia's professional demeanor returned as she addressed the captain directly. The Chinese will analyze what happened and adapt their designs. This advantage won't last. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. We need to report this to Fleet Command immediately. The implications for naval strategy in the Pacific are significant. There's more, Olivia said, her voice dropping lower. Based on the search patterns we observed, I believe they're preparing to deploy these weapons around the disputed underwater resource zone. If they succeed, they could effectively deny access to our vessels without directly engaging us, the underwater equivalent of an anti-access area denial strategy. The officers exchanged concerned glances. Such a strategy could shift the balance of power in the region overnight. We need to gather more intelligence before withdrawing, Olivia continued. If we can determine the full extent of their deployment plans, we can develop effective countermeasures. Captain Reynolds considered this carefully. You're asking me to maintain station near hostile forces that have already attempted to destroy us once. Yes, Captain. But with modifications to our defensive systems based on what we've learned, we can operate with reasonable safety, and the intelligence would be invaluable. Reynolds studied her weapons officer. No, her weapons developer, with new respect. Very well. We'll maintain observation for another 24 hours. gather what intelligence we can, and then withdraw to report our findings. As the meeting concluded, and officers returned to their stations, Harrington approached Olivia. His usual arrogance was subdued, replaced by something more complex. "You could have ended my career at any time," he said quietly. "One call to your contacts at the Pentagon would have been enough." Olivia met his gaze steadily. "That would have exposed my identity. And, regardless, I didn't come here seeking revenge or recognition. I came seeking redemption." "Redemption for what? You said yourself the accident wasn't your fault." "The technology I created killed 3 of my closest friends. Whether I triggered it or not, their blood is on my hands." She turned away from him, focusing on the weapons console. "Now, if you'll excuse me, Executive Officer, I need to modify our defensive systems before the Chinese launch another attack." Harrington stood for a moment longer, his worldview visibly shifting as he processed what he'd learned. The woman he'd been tormenting wasn't just another officer. She was someone who'd operated at levels of authority and responsibility he could barely comprehend, someone who had chosen to serve silently despite possessing knowledge that could have earned her admiral's stars. As he walked away, the dynamic between them had fundamentally changed. The power he'd wielded so carelessly had evaporated, replaced by the uncomfortable realization that he had spent months attempting to break someone who had already been broken in ways he couldn't imagine, and who had rebuilt herself stronger than before. The submarine settled into its new mission parameters, maintaining a safe distance while gathering intelligence on the Chinese vessels. Throughout the vessel, word spread quickly. Not the full classified details, but enough for the crew to understand that their weapons officer had saved their lives using knowledge few in the Navy possessed. In the weapons bay, Olivia worked with renewed purpose, modifying defensive systems and preparing countermeasures against potential attacks. Commander Chen joined her, providing assistance and security against interruptions. "They're talking about you," he said as he handed her a specialized diagnostic tool. "The crew. They're calling you the Phantom." Olivia's hands paused momentarily. That was a long time ago. Not to them. To them, it's happening right now. The quiet officer who saved everyone with mysterious knowledge and skills. Chen's voice was gentle. "Legends aren't just created by what we do, but by how people perceive what we do. I didn't come here to be a legend. Number you came here to hide. But perhaps that's not what you needed after all." Before she could respond, the submarine's alert system activated again. "Multiple surface vessels changing course," announced the tactical officer over the intercom. "They're moving to surround our position." Olivia and Chen exchanged concerned glances. "They're trying to force us to surface," she said, already moving toward the command center, "or to retreat from the area entirely." When they arrived, Captain Reynolds was studying the tactical display with intense focus. "They've deployed in a search pattern directly above us. If we move, their sensors will detect our acoustic signature." "They're hunting us," Harrington said, his voice tense but controlled. "Using their surface vessels to force us into a predictable escape route where their underwater weapons can target us." Olivia analyzed the display, her mind calculating possibilities with the same precision she once applied to weapons design. "They're adapting faster than I anticipated. They've already modified their search patterns based on our previous countermeasures." "Options?" Reynolds asked, her focus entirely on the tactical situation. "Standard evasion protocols won't work," Olivia replied. "They'll anticipate our movements and position their weapons accordingly. We need something unpredictable." She moved to the weapons console, pulling up schematics of their remaining prototype torpedo. "I can modify this to create a diversion. Not just acoustic decoys, but a complex false signature that will mimic our submarine with enough fidelity to confuse their tracking systems." "How long?" the captain asked. 20 minutes for the modifications. But I'll need full access to the submarine's acoustic signature database." Reynolds nodded without hesitation. "Granted. Commander Chen, assist Dr. Reese with whatever she needs." The use of her real title in front of the entire command crew confirmed the shift in her status. She was no longer hiding behind a false identity. She was Dr. Olivia Reese, weapons developer, and the submarine's best hope for survival. As Olivia and Chen raced to the weapons bay, Harrington called after them. "Mitchell." "Dr. Reese, wait." They paused, turning to face the executive officer. "I was wrong about you," he said, the admission clearly difficult for him. "I made assumptions based on my own biases. I apologize." For a moment, Olivia was speechless. Then she nodded once, acknowledging his words without accepting or rejecting them. "If we survive this, Executive Officer, we can discuss it further. Right now, we have work to do." In the weapons bay, Olivia and Chen worked with frantic precision, modifying the prototype torpedo to create an acoustic signature indistinguishable from the Barracuda itself. The technology was experimental, combining elements from her original research with innovations she'd developed during her 5 years on active submarine duty. "This goes beyond standard countermeasures," Chen observed as he assisted with the modifications. "You're essentially creating a ghost submarine. The Chinese are using algorithms designed to differentiate between actual vessels and decoys," Olivia explained, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Standard decoys only replicate some acoustic characteristics. This will replicate all of them: engine noise, crew movements, even the minute vibrations from life support systems. They won't know which is the real submarine and which is the decoy." "Exactly. And in their confusion, we'll have a window to maneuver to a safer position." As they worked, Olivia found herself reflecting on the irony of the situation. 5 years ago, she had been developing weapons designed to hunt and destroy submarines. Now she was using that same knowledge to protect one. The technology she had once viewed with profound ambivalence was now their only hope for survival. "Do you regret it?" Chen asked quietly as they finalized the modifications. "Creating the technology that's now being used against us?" Olivia's hands stilled momentarily. "I regret the deaths it caused. I regret not considering all the potential consequences. But the technology itself, it was inevitable. If we hadn't developed it, someone else would have." She resumed her work, making final adjustments to the guidance system. "What matters is how we use knowledge, not the knowledge itself." The modified torpedo was ready, just as Captain Reynolds contacted them for a status update. "Chinese vessels are tightening their search pattern," she reported. "We're detecting active sonar sweeps from multiple directions. They know we're here." "We're ready, Captain," Olivia responded. "The modified torpedo can be deployed immediately." Execute. The torpedo launched with barely perceptible movement, carrying with it a complex set of technologies designed to create a perfect acoustic doppelganger of the Barracuda. For several tense minutes, nothing seemed to happen as the weapon moved to a position approximately 2 kilometers from their actual location. Then the tactical display lit up with activity. "Multiple Chinese vessels changing course," reported the sonar operator. "They're converging on a position east of our location." "They've detected our decoy," Chen said, watching the display with growing hope. "Now comes the real test," Olivia murmured. "If they launch weapons, we'll see if they target the decoy or identify it as a fake." The answer came minutes later, as multiple underwater signatures launched from the Chinese vessels. "Torpedoes in the water," announced the sonar operator. "They're targeting the decoy position." Captain Reynolds seized the opportunity. "Helm, commence evasion pattern Delta." Maximum quiet. The submarine began a carefully calculated retreat, using the ocean's thermal layers to mask their movement, while the Chinese forces concentrated their attack on the phantom submarine Olivia had created. On the tactical display, they watched as multiple weapons converged on the decoy's position. "Detonation confirmed," reported the sonar operator. "Chinese forces are continuing to target the same location." "They think they've hit us," Harrington said, a note of respect in his voice. "Your decoy was convincing enough that they believe they've scored a kill." Olivia nodded, but her attention was already focused on the next phase of their escape. "They'll realize their mistake soon. We need to put as much distance as possible between us before they begin searching again." For the next hour, the Barracuda executed a complex evasion pattern, using underwater terrain and thermal conditions to mask their retreat from the area. By the time the Chinese forces realized they had destroyed a decoy rather than the actual submarine, the Barracuda was well outside their search perimeter. "We're clear," announced Captain Reynolds, allowing herself a small smile of satisfaction. "Well done, everyone. Especially you, Dr. Reese." The acknowledgement sent a ripple of reactions through the command center. Some officers looked surprised at the use of her real name and title, while others nodded in understanding, pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. "Thank you, Captain," Olivia replied formally. "But we're not finished. The intelligence we've gathered needs to be analyzed and reported immediately." "Agreed. Prepare a full briefing for Fleet Command. I want comprehensive analysis of the Chinese weapons capabilities, deployment strategies, and your recommendations for countermeasures." As the submarine continued its journey towards safer waters, Olivia found herself working alongside Harrington, analyzing the data they had gathered. The tension between them had transformed into something more productive. Not quite collaboration, but no longer active hostility. "These weapons represent a significant escalation," Harrington observed as they reviewed the sensor data. "If deployed in sufficient numbers, they could effectively deny access to large portions of the Pacific." "Yes, but they have weaknesses," Olivia replied, highlighting specific signatures in the data. "Their autonomous systems are less sophisticated than what we were developing. They can be confused, misdirected, even turned against their controllers with the right countermeasures." "Countermeasures? You know how to develop." She nodded slowly. "Yes, but implementing them would require—" She hesitated. "Revealing your identity," Harrington finished for her, becoming Dr. Olivia Reese again. "Yes. And reopening investigations into the accident that killed my colleagues." Harrington was quiet for a moment, studying her with new understanding. "Sometimes running from the past isn't the same as honoring it. Your friends died trying to prevent those weapons from causing harm. Maybe the best way to honor their sacrifice is to finish what they started. Not just the technology, but the safeguards that would prevent it from being misused." His insight surprised her. The man who had spent months trying to break her spirit was now offering perspective that cut to the heart of her internal conflict. Before she could respond, Captain Reynolds joined them. "Fleet Command has ordered us to return to Pearl Harbor immediately," she announced. "They're assembling a task force to address the Chinese weapons deployment." "Dr. Reese, they've specifically requested your presence at the strategic briefing." Olivia felt a momentary surge of panic. "They know who I am?" "Yes. I had to include your real identity in my report, given the nature of the threat." The captain's expression was sympathetic but firm. "This goes beyond personal concerns, Doctor. The technology you helped develop is now being deployed against us. Your expertise isn't just valuable, it's essential." The walls of anonymity she had built around herself were completely gone now. After 5 years of hiding, of serving in silence, she was being called back into the light. Not as a weapons officer, but as the brilliant developer whose work had both endangered and saved lives. "I understand, Captain," she said finally. "I'll prepare a comprehensive briefing on the technology and potential countermeasures." As Reynolds nodded and moved away, Harrington remained, watching Olivia with an expression she couldn't quite read. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I think you're making the right decision, and I think your friends would be proud." Coming from the man who had been her most persistent tormentor, the words carried unexpected weight. As Harrington walked away, Olivia found herself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. She had joined the Barracuda seeking anonymity, hoping to escape the ghosts of her past. Instead, she had found herself confronting them directly, and in doing so, perhaps finding a path toward the redemption she had been seeking all along. The submarine continued its journey toward Pearl Harbor, carrying with it intelligence that would reshape naval strategy in the Pacific. But for Olivia, the most significant change wasn't strategic, but personal. After 5 years of hiding in the shadows, she was stepping back into the light, not despite her past, but because of it. The reckoning she had feared for so long had arrived, but not in the way she had anticipated. Instead of destroying her, it had revealed a strength she hadn't known she possessed. The courage to face not just external threats, but the deepest fears within herself. The USS Barracuda surfaced at Pearl Harbor under the brilliant Hawaiian sun. The dock was unusually crowded for a submarine arrival. Uniformed officers, civilian specialists, and security personnel waited in tight formation. Olivia stood on the conning tower beside Captain Reynolds, watching the assembled group with a mixture of apprehension and resolve. "Quite the welcome committee," Reynolds observed quietly. "They're not here to welcome us," Olivia replied. "They're here to secure a valuable asset, me." As they disembarked, a senior officer stepped forward, Admiral William Donovan, commander of the Pacific Fleet. His weathered face was serious, but not unfriendly as he saluted Captain Reynolds and then turned to Olivia. "Dr. Reese," he said, extending his hand. "Or should I say Lieutenant Commander Mitchell? Your reputation precedes you, both of them." Olivia returned his handshake with firm confidence. "Dr. Reese will do, Admiral." It seems that identity is no longer a secret. Indeed, we have a secure facility prepared for debriefing. The Joint Chiefs are standing by via secure video conference. Time is of the essence. As Olivia followed the Admiral toward a waiting vehicle, she glanced back at the submarine. The crew was disembarking in orderly fashion, but many paused to watch her departure. Among them stood Executive Officer Harrington, his expression unreadable as he offered a formal salute. The gesture contained a respect that would have been unimaginable days earlier. The debriefing facility was a windowless concrete structure, its interior filled with advanced communication equipment and displays. Senior officers from all branches of the military were present, along with civilian analysts from intelligence agencies. "Dr. Reese," Admiral Donovan began once everyone was assembled. "Your report from the Barracuda has sent shockwaves through Naval Command. The Chinese deployment of autonomous underwater weapons represents a strategic shift we were not prepared for. We need to understand exactly what we're facing." Olivia nodded, stepping to the main display. For the next hour, she detailed the weapons they had encountered, their capabilities, limitations, and the technological principles behind them. She explained how the Chinese had replicated aspects of Project Poseidon but missed crucial safety protocols and operational refinements. "The good news," she concluded, "is that their technology is still in development. The weapons we encountered were advanced prototypes, not fully operational systems. We have a window of opportunity to develop effective countermeasures." "And you know how to develop these countermeasures," stated a general from the Joint Chiefs, his face grave on the video screen. "Yes. I can design systems that would neutralize their current capabilities and anticipated developments, but doing so would require reinstating aspects of Project Poseidon, a program that was suspended for good reasons." A tense silence followed her statement. Everyone in the room understood the implications. Project Poseidon had been shut down after fatal accidents. Reviving it carried both technical and ethical concerns. Admiral Donovan leaned forward. "Dr. Reese, let's address the elephant in the room. The accident that ended Project Poseidon claimed 3 lives. The official investigation concluded it was equipment failure, but there have always been questions." Olivia took a deep breath. This was the moment she had dreaded for 5 years. "The equipment didn't fail, Admiral. The targeting parameters were deliberately altered." The room fell silent as she continued. "Someone with high-level access changed the friend or foe identification protocols, causing the prototype to identify our research vessel as hostile. By the time we realized what was happening, it was too late to prevent the attack completely." "You're saying it was sabotage," Admiral Donovan stated flatly. "Yes. But we could never prove who was responsible. After the accident, the program was suspended. The evidence was classified, and She paused. "I chose to disappear rather than fight battles I couldn't win." A civilian in an expensive suit spoke up. "Director Harris from Naval Intelligence." "Dr. Reese, are you suggesting there was a cover-up?" "I'm stating that there was never a full investigation. 3 brilliant people died. The most advanced weapons program in naval history was shuttered. And somehow, 5 years later, the Chinese are deploying remarkably similar technology. Those facts deserve scrutiny." The implications hung heavy in the air. If Project Poseidon had been compromised from within, it represented one of the most significant security breaches in modern naval history. Admiral Donovan exchanged glances with the Joint Chiefs on the video screens. After a moment of silent communication, he turned back to Olivia. "Dr. Reese, we're reactivating Project Poseidon under your direction, effective immediately. You'll have whatever resources you need to develop countermeasures against the Chinese weapons." "And the investigation into what happened 5 years ago," she asked, "will be reopened with the highest priority." His expression softened slightly. "Your colleagues deserve justice, Doctor. And if their deaths were the result of espionage, we need to know who was responsible." As the meeting concluded, Olivia found herself escorted to a new office in the Naval Research Facility, a space already equipped with advanced computers and secure communications. She stood at the window, looking out over Pearl Harbor, the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Captain Reynolds entered, now in her formal uniform rather than submarine duty attire. "Captain!" Olivia greeted her with surprise. "I expected you'd be debriefing with Fleet Command." "Already done. I've been reassigned as military liaison to Project Poseidon. Apparently, my experience with you and the Chinese weapons made me the logical choice." Reynolds studied her thoughtfully. "How are you handling all this?" Olivia turned back to the window. 5 years of hiding, erased in a matter of days. Now I'm leading the program I walked away from, investigating the deaths I've never stopped mourning, and developing weapons I'm not entirely sure should exist. Having second thoughts? Number just. Recognizing the magnitude of what's ahead. She faced Reynolds again. The Chinese deployment changes everything. If we don't develop countermeasures, we're conceding control of vast areas of the Pacific. But rushing development is what led to tragedy before. Then we don't rush, Reynolds said firmly. We do it right this time, with proper oversight, proper testing, and proper safeguards. Another knock interrupted them, a junior officer with a tablet. "Dr. Reese, your team has arrived." Olivia followed the officer to a conference room where a dozen people waited, some in uniform, others in civilian attire. Among them, she was shocked to see Commander Chen from the Barracuda. "Commander, I thought you'd be remaining with the submarine." Chen smiled slightly. "My assignment to the Barracuda was always temporary, Doctor. My primary role has been monitoring potential security breaches in naval weapons programs." Understanding dawned. "You were investigating Project Poseidon." "Investigating me?" "Not exactly. I was investigating who might have compromised the program. Your decision to change identities and serve on submarines was unexpected." Before she could respond, another familiar face entered the room. Executive Officer Harrington, now in his formal uniform with insignia indicating a promotion. "Commander Harrington," she acknowledged, surprise evident in her voice. "Dr. Reese." His normally confident demeanor seemed subdued. "I've been assigned as security coordinator for the project." Admiral Donovan thought my perspective might be valuable. The irony wasn't lost on her. The man who had spent months trying to undermine her was now responsible for her safety and the security of her work. But something fundamental had changed in their dynamics since the submarine's encounter with the Chinese weapons. "Welcome to the team, Commander," she said simply, then turned to address the assembled group. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have an enormous challenge ahead. The Chinese have deployed autonomous underwater weapons based on technology developed in Project Poseidon. Our job is to understand their capabilities, develop effective countermeasures, and ensure American naval forces maintain superiority in the Pacific." She moved to the main display, bringing up schematics from the original project. "I'll be honest with you all. This technology is as dangerous as it is powerful. 5 years ago, it cost the lives of 3 brilliant people. People I was privileged to call colleagues and friends. We will not make the same mistakes again." As the briefing progressed, Olivia felt a strange sense of déjà vu. 5 years earlier, she had stood before a similar team, full of optimism about the potential of their work. Now she returned older, wiser, and carrying the weight of lives lost. But she also carried something else. A determination to honor those lives by completing the work they had begun and ensuring it served its intended purpose. Later that evening, as the facility emptied for the night, Olivia remained at her desk, reviewing data from the Barracuda's encounter. Commander Harrington appeared in her doorway holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, setting one on her desk. "The first day back is always the longest." She accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. "Bit different from our interactions on the submarine." "Yes." He seemed to struggle with what to say next. "I owe you an apology, Dr. Reese. My behavior toward you was unprofessional and unwarranted." "Why did you do it?" she asked directly. "Was it just because I'm a woman, or was there something more?" Harrington looked uncomfortable, but answered honestly. "When you first came aboard, I saw someone who seemed out of place. too skilled with weapons for a standard officer, but unwilling to assert that expertise. It felt wrong, like you were hiding something. I was. Yes, but I didn't know what. So I pushed, trying to force you to reveal whatever you were concealing. He shook his head. I told myself it was about security, about maintaining standards. But the truth is, I was threatened by you, by your competence, your self-control, your refusal to respond to provocation. His admission surprised her. And now I understand what I was actually seeing. Someone carrying burdens I couldn't comprehend. Someone who had sacrificed more for this country than I ever have. He met her gaze directly. I was wrong about you, Doctor. Completely wrong. The apology was unexpected but sincere. Olivia considered it for a long moment before responding. We all make judgments based on incomplete information, Commander. The question is whether we're willing to revise those judgments when new information emerges. Is that forgiveness? He asked with a hint of his old confidence. It's acknowledgement that people can change, myself included. She turned back to her work. Now, if you're going to be security coordinator for this project, there are some things you should know about the original security protocols. As they began reviewing the security systems, Olivia realized that something fundamental had shifted. The man who had once been her tormentor was now potentially a valuable ally. It was a transformation she wouldn't have believed possible days earlier. A reminder that people were capable of growth and change when confronted with their own misconceptions. The next morning, Admiral Donovan arrived for a progress update. Olivia led him through the preliminary countermeasure designs her team had developed overnight. These are impressive, Doctor, he said, studying the schematics. How quickly can they be implemented? The initial defensive systems could be deployed to Pacific Fleet submarines within 2 weeks. The more advanced countermeasures will take longer, at least 2 months for full development and testing. We may not have 2 months. Intelligence suggests the Chinese are accelerating their deployment schedule. Quote. Olivia frowned. Rushing development is exactly what led to tragedy before, Admiral. I understand your concerns, but the strategic situation is deteriorating rapidly. The Chinese are positioning their weapons around critical shipping lanes and resource zones. If they succeed, they'll effectively control vast areas of the Pacific without firing a shot. She recognized the pressure he was under, the same pressure that had compromised safety protocols 5 years earlier. History seemed to be repeating itself. Admiral, may I speak frankly? Please do. 5 years ago, political and budgetary pressures led to corners being cut. 3 people died as a result. If we make the same mistake again, the consequences could be far worse. She faced him directly. I need your assurance that we'll do this right, even if it takes longer. Donovan studied her for a long moment before responding. You have my word, Doctor. We'll proceed at whatever pace is necessary to ensure safety and effectiveness. As he departed, Commander Chen joined her at the display. He means it, Chen said quietly. The Admiral was one of the few who pushed for a full investigation after the accident. He was overruled by higher authorities. This was new information. Why wasn't I told? You had already disappeared by then, changed your name, accepted reduced rank, requested submarine duty. It seemed better to let you forge your new path without reopening old wounds. Olivia absorbed this in silence. For 5 years she had believed she stood alone. Learning that others had fought for the truth, had fought for her team, was both comforting and painful. There's more, Chen continued. The investigation into the original security breach has been reopened. Naval intelligence has been analyzing access logs from 5 years ago, trying to determine who altered the targeting parameters. Any progress? Not yet, but they're being thorough this time. He hesitated before adding, they're also investigating whether there's a connection between that incident and the Chinese weapons development. The implication was clear. The sabotage that killed her colleagues might have been part of a larger espionage operation. If true, it transformed a tragedy into something even darker, the deliberate sacrifice of American lives to advance a foreign power's military capabilities. Over the next week, Project Poseidon gained momentum. Olivia's team worked around the clock, developing countermeasures against the Chinese weapons while simultaneously investigating the original technology breach. The work was challenging but purposeful, giving Olivia a sense of closure she had never expected to find. Commander Harrington proved surprisingly effective as security coordinator. His attention to detail and insistence on proper protocols created a framework that balanced access with security. More unexpectedly, his willingness to acknowledge his past misjudgments earned him growing respect from the team, including Olivia herself. 10 days into the project, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of the junior analysts discovered an anomaly in the original access logs, a pattern of system entries that had been overlooked in the initial investigation. "It's subtle," the analyst explained as she displayed her findings. "Someone with high-level access was reviewing the targeting parameters at odd hours, making small adjustments that wouldn't trigger security alerts. Over time, these adjustments accumulated, eventually causing the system to misidentify friendly vessels as hostile." "Do we know who?" Olivia asked, studying the data with intense focus. The access credentials belonged to Admiral Robert Langston. The name hit Olivia like a physical blow. Langston had been the program's military overseer, the man who had pressured them to accelerate testing, who had insisted the demonstration proceed despite technical concerns. "That's impossible," Captain Reynolds said, voicing what everyone was thinking. Admiral Langston was one of the program's strongest advocates. Why would he sabotage it? "Where is Langston now?" Harrington asked. Chen checked his tablet. "Retired 3 years ago, living in Northern Virginia." Olivia's mind was racing, connecting dots that had eluded her for years. The Chinese weapons use guidance algorithms nearly identical to our original designs. Details that weren't in any of the official documentation. Someone with intimate knowledge of the program provided them with that information. "You think Langston was a Chinese asset?" Reynolds asked, her voice low. "I think we need to find out." Olivia turned to Admiral Donovan, who had been listening silently. "Sir, this goes beyond Project Poseidon. If Admiral Langston compromised the program and shared classified weapons technology with the Chinese, it represents one of the most significant security breaches in naval history." Donovan's expression was grim. "I'll contact the FBI and Naval Intelligence immediately. In the meantime, continue your work on the countermeasures. If Langston did share our technology, we need to ensure it can't be used against us." As the Admiral departed to make the necessary calls, Olivia found herself standing before the memorial wall her team had created. Photographs of Marcus Chen, Eliza Torres, and David Rodriguez, the colleagues who had died during the failed demonstration. For 5 years she had carried the weight of their deaths, believing they were the result of technical failures she should have prevented. Now, facing the possibility that they had been deliberately sacrificed as part of an espionage operation, she felt a complex mixture of emotions: anger at the betrayal, relief that she hadn't been responsible, and renewed determination to honor their sacrifice by completing the work they had begun. "They deserved better," Harrington said quietly, joining her at the memorial. "Yes, they deserved the truth." She turned to face him. "And now, finally, they might get it." 2 days later, the FBI arrested Admiral Robert Langston at his Virginia home. The evidence against him was substantial. Not just the altered access logs, but financial records showing unexplained deposits coinciding with critical stages of Project Poseidon and encrypted communications with Chinese operatives discovered during a search of his residence. The news reached Project Poseidon as the team was finalizing the first generation of countermeasures. Olivia received the confirmation with quiet satisfaction. Justice for her colleagues wouldn't bring them back, but it provided a resolution she had never expected to find. "What happens now?" Captain Reynolds asked as they prepared for the first deployment of their countermeasure systems to Pacific Fleet submarines. "We complete the mission," Olivia replied simply. "We develop the technology to neutralize the threat. We ensure proper safeguards are in place, and we make sure this can never happen again." The first submarine to receive the countermeasure systems was, fittingly, the USS Barracuda. Olivia personally supervised the installation, working alongside the weapons officers who had once viewed her with suspicion or dismissal. Now they treated her with a respect bordering on awe, not just for her technical expertise, but for the moral courage she had demonstrated both during the crisis and in its aftermath. As the installation neared completion, she found herself alone in the weapons bay with Commander Harrington, who had returned to oversee security for the deployment. "Strange to be back here," he observed. "Feels like a lifetime ago." "It was a different life," she agreed. "For both of us." He nodded thoughtfully. Do you ever regret it? Coming back, I mean, you could have continued as Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, served out your career in relative anonymity, and left the Chinese with unchallenged weapons technology? Left my colleagues' deaths uninvestigated? She shook her head. Some responsibilities can't be abandoned, Commander, no matter how tempting it might be. That's what makes you different, he said with unexpected insight. You never saw your knowledge as power to be wielded. You saw it as a responsibility to be carried. The observation was surprisingly perceptive from a man who had once dismissed her capabilities entirely. People could change, she reflected. Sometimes it just took a crisis to reveal their true character. 3 weeks after the project's reactivation, Olivia stood in the command center as reports came in from the South China Sea. The USS Hammerhead, equipped with the countermeasures she had developed, had successfully neutralized multiple Chinese autonomous weapons attempting to deny access to international waters. No casualties, no escalation, no direct confrontation. Admiral Donovan summarized with satisfaction. The Chinese are recalling their weapons for technical evaluation. It seems they've realized their technology isn't as effective as they believed. They'll adapt, Olivia cautioned. This is just the first round in what will likely be an ongoing technological competition. Then we'll stay ahead of them. The Admiral turned to face the assembled team. Thanks to all of you, especially you, Dr. Reese. You've not only developed critical defensive technology but helped uncover a significant security breach. The nation owes you a debt of gratitude. As the briefing concluded, Olivia found herself surrounded by her team, scientists, engineers, and military personnel who had come together to address a common threat. Among them stood Commander Harrington and Captain Reynolds, both now firm allies in her mission. What's next for you, Doctor? Reynolds asked. Will you continue leading Project Poseidon? Olivia had been considering this question for days. The project would continue. The technological race with China demanded it, but did she want to remain at its head? Yes, she said finally, but with some changes. We'll focus on defensive systems rather than offensive capabilities. And we'll implement safeguards that can't be overridden, even by admirals. Harrington smiled slightly. Setting boundaries already. Boundaries are what separate responsible innovation from reckless advancement. She replied. Something I learned the hard way. As the team dispersed to continue their work, Olivia returned to her office. On her desk sat a small memorial, photographs of Marcus, Eliza, and David, alongside the official notification that the investigation into their deaths had been closed with conclusive findings of sabotage. 5 years of carrying unwarranted guilt had ended. The colleagues she had mourned had not died because of her mistakes but because of deliberate betrayal. Their sacrifice had not been in vain. It had ultimately led to the discovery of a significant security breach and the development of technologies that would protect American naval forces for years to come. Olivia touched each photograph gently. We finished what we started, she said quietly, and we made sure it was done right this time. Outside her window, Pearl Harbor bustled with activity as submarines prepared to deploy with their new defensive systems. The quiet weapons officer who had endured months of harassment was gone, replaced by the brilliant developer whose expertise had become the Pacific Fleet's most valuable asset. The Phantom had emerged from the shadows, not diminished by exposure to the light, but strengthened by it. In facing her past, she had not only reclaimed her identity but redefined it. No longer defined by tragedy, but by the resilience and determination that had allowed her to overcome it. 6 months after the reactivation of Project Poseidon, Dr. Olivia Reese stood before the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the Pentagon's secure briefing room. The atmosphere was tense but respectful as she presented the program's progress and future directions. The countermeasure systems have been successfully deployed to all Pacific Fleet submarines, she explained, gesturing to the data displayed on the main screen. In 17 documented encounters, our vessels have neutralized Chinese autonomous weapons without a single casualty or escalation to direct conflict. Admiral Donovan, now her strongest advocate within naval leadership, nodded with satisfaction. The strategic impact has been significant. The Chinese have withdrawn their most aggressive deployments and appear to be reassessing their approach. They're adapting, Olivia cautioned. Our intelligence indicates they're already developing second-generation systems designed to overcome our current countermeasures. This isn't a war we win once. It's an ongoing technological competition. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs leaned forward. And your recommendation, Doctor? We continue development of defensive technologies while establishing clear ethical frameworks for autonomous systems. She brought up a new slide showing proposed international protocols. I've drafted guidelines that would allow for defensive applications while restricting offensive capabilities that remove humans from critical decision loops. Some of the military leaders exchanged skeptical glances. One general spoke up, his tone diplomatic, but challenging. Dr. Reese, while your technical expertise is unquestioned, many would argue that restricting our own capabilities while adversaries develop similar technologies without constraint puts American forces at a disadvantage. Olivia had anticipated this objection. With respect, General, I've seen firsthand the consequences of developing technology without adequate safeguards. 3 of my colleagues died because autonomous systems were rushed into testing. The Chinese are currently experiencing similar failures. Our intelligence has confirmed at least 2 incidents where their weapons targeted their own vessels. She stepped closer to the table, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned the right to be heard. The advantage lies not in developing technology first, but in developing it right. Our systems work because we've implemented safeguards and ethical constraints that the Chinese have ignored. Their rush to deploy has resulted in unreliable weapons that their own commanders don't fully trust. The room fell silent as the military leaders considered her words. Finally, the chairman nodded slowly. Your perspective is valuable, Doctor, precisely because you understand both the technical and human dimensions of this challenge. We'll review your proposed protocols and incorporate them into our strategic planning. As the meeting concluded, Olivia felt a sense of accomplishment that went beyond technical success. She was not only developing defensive systems, but helping shape the ethical framework that would govern their use, fulfilling a responsibility she had once abdicated by disappearing into anonymity. Outside the Pentagon, Commander Harrington waited beside a black SUV. Their professional relationship had evolved into a respectful collaboration, with Harrington serving as the primary military liaison for Project Poseidon. "How did it go?" he asked as she approached. "Better than expected. They're actually listening to the ethical concerns, not just the technical capabilities. You've earned their respect." He opened the vehicle door. Not many people tell the Joint Chiefs what they should and shouldn't do with weapons technology. Someone has to. She settled into the passenger seat. Otherwise, we risk repeating the same mistakes that got us here. As they drove toward the Naval Research Facility in Maryland, Harrington updated her on developments during her absence. The Chinese ambassador has requested a meeting with State Department officials. Unofficially, they're suggesting a mutual limitation agreement on autonomous underwater weapons. Olivia raised an eyebrow. That's unexpected. Is it? Their weapons aren't working as intended. Ours are. They're looking for a diplomatic solution to a technological problem. Or buying time to improve their systems, she countered. Always the strategist. We should proceed with caution. Harrington nodded in agreement. 6 months ago, he would have dismissed her concerns as paranoia. Now, he valued her perspective above most others, a transformation neither of them could have predicted during their contentious days aboard the Barracuda. At the research facility, Olivia's team had gathered for an important test. The next generation of countermeasures was ready for evaluation. Systems designed not just to neutralize Chinese weapons, but to redirect them safely away from potential targets. Dr. Reese called Dr. Sarah Lynn, one of the brilliant young engineers who had joined the project. "We're ready when you are." The test environment was a sophisticated simulation of Pacific Ocean conditions, complete with thermal layers, underwater terrain, and acoustic characteristics that mirrored the actual deployment environment. Olivia had insisted on rigorous testing protocols, determined to prevent the kind of rush to deployment that had led to tragedy 5 years earlier. "Begin the sequence," she instructed, taking position at the main control console. The simulation activated, showing a submarine under threat from multiple autonomous weapons. The countermeasure system engaged automatically, identifying the incoming threats and deploying a complex electromagnetic field that disrupted their guidance systems without destroying them. "Redirection successful," reported the technical analyst. "All simulated weapons have been diverted to safe zones without detonation." A round of applause broke out among the team. This was a significant advancement, moving from simply neutralizing threats to controlling them in ways that prevented escalation. It represented exactly the kind of responsible innovation Olivia had been advocating. "Excellent work, everyone," she acknowledged. "Run the full protocol series and document all results. I want comprehensive data before we move to field testing." As the team dispersed to their various tasks, Captain Reynolds approached. Now serving as the program's Naval Operations Director, she had become one of Olivia's most trusted allies. "Impressive demonstration," she observed. "But I suspect there's more to it than you're showing." Olivia smiled slightly. Reynolds had always been perceptive. "The system doesn't just redirect hostile weapons. It identifies their origin points with enough precision to determine which vessel launched them." "Attribution capability," Reynolds nodded, understanding immediately. "That changes the strategic equation significantly. Hostile actors can no longer deploy autonomous weapons with plausible deniability." "Exactly. It creates accountability, which is the foundation of responsible use." Olivia gestured toward her office. "There's something else I want to discuss with you privately." In her office, with the door closed and security protocols activated, Olivia revealed the project she had been working on independently: a comprehensive framework for international regulation of autonomous underwater weapons. "I've been consulting with legal experts and ethicists," she explained. "This proposal establishes verification regimes, testing protocols, and safety requirements that would apply to all nations developing these technologies." Reynolds studied the document thoughtfully. "This goes well beyond military applications." "It has to. The technology we're developing will eventually spread to other domains: civilian shipping, underwater resource extraction, environmental monitoring. We need frameworks that address the full spectrum of applications. The military and intelligence communities won't like constraints on their capabilities. They'll like the alternative even less." Olivia's expression was resolute. "Imagine a world where anyone with technical knowledge can deploy autonomous underwater weapons without accountability or safeguards. The oceans would become unnavigable danger zones." Reynolds recognized the validity of the concern. "You're thinking beyond the current conflict to the long-term implications." "Someone has to." Olivia turned to look at the photographs on her desk. Marcus, Eliza, and David, the colleagues whose deaths had started her on this journey. They would have wanted their work to make the world safer, not more dangerous. The captain studied her with newfound respect. "You've come a long way from the quiet weapons officer hiding on a submarine. We all have our journeys, Captain. Mine just happened to come full circle." Later that evening, as Olivia prepared to leave the facility, she was surprised to find Admiral Donovan waiting in the lobby. His presence at this hour was unusual, suggesting news that couldn't wait until morning. "Admiral," she acknowledged, "I wasn't expecting you." "This couldn't wait for official channels." He gestured toward a secure conference room. "We've received intelligence you need to see immediately." Once inside, with security protocols engaged, Donovan activated a classified data feed. 12 hours ago, a Chinese research vessel experienced a catastrophic accident in the South China Sea. The official report claims it was a propulsion system failure, but our intelligence suggests otherwise. The screen displayed satellite imagery of a vessel listing heavily emergency vessels surrounding it. "Their advanced weapons program has experienced a critical failure, similar to what happened to your team 5 years ago, but on a larger scale." Olivia studied the images with growing concern. "Casualties?" "At least 17 confirmed, possibly more." Donovan's expression was grim. "Their autonomous targeting system appears to have malfunctioned during a test, identifying their own vessels as hostile. The weapons activated before safety protocols could be engaged." The parallels to her own experience were unmistakable. "They're repeating our mistakes," she said quietly. "Rushing development, cutting corners on safety protocols." "Yes, but with a critical difference. Their program is being directed by military commanders, with limited technical understanding and immense political pressure to deliver results." The Admiral met her gaze directly, "Which brings me to why I'm here. The State Department has received an unusual request through diplomatic channels. The Chinese want to talk, specifically to you." Olivia was stunned. "To me? Why?" They're claiming technical difficulties that they can't resolve internally. Reading between the lines, their weapons program is in crisis. They're experiencing cascading failures that threaten their own vessels and personnel. Donovan paused, letting the implications sink in. They know about your background with Project Poseidon. They know you develop solutions to similar problems. They want my help, she realized, the irony not lost on her. The same people who stole our technology and deployed it recklessly now want me to help them fix the problems they've created. Essentially, yes. Though they're framing it as a humanitarian concern, preventing accidental deaths from malfunctioning systems. Olivia considered the request carefully. Her initial instinct was refusal. Why help an adversary overcome technical challenges with weapons designed to target American vessels? But deeper consideration revealed a more nuanced perspective. Unstable autonomous weapons in the Pacific aren't in anyone's interest, she said finally. Malfunctioning systems could target any vessel, military or civilian, from any nation. The risk of accidental escalation is significant. Donovan nodded, having anticipated her analysis. Exactly, which is why the State Department is considering authorizing limited technical consultation, focused specifically on safety protocols and fail-safe systems, not operational capabilities. And they want me to lead this consultation. You're uniquely qualified, Doctor. You understand the technology better than anyone. You've developed effective safety protocols, and you have first-hand experience with the consequences of system failures. It was a proposal that would have been unthinkable months earlier. American and Chinese scientists collaborating on technology that both nations had classified at the highest levels. But the alternative, leaving unstable autonomous weapons deployed throughout the Pacific, posed risks that transcended national rivalries. I'll do it, Olivia decided, but on my terms. The consultation focuses exclusively on safety systems and fail-safe protocols. Any attempt to extract operational information ends the collaboration immediately. Agreed. Donovan seemed relieved by her decision. The diplomatic details are being arranged. The consultation will take place on neutral territory. Singapore has offered to host. As the Admiral departed, Olivia remained in the conference room, contemplating the unexpected turn of events. 5 years ago, she had fled from responsibility, changing her identity to escape the consequences of a tragedy she hadn't caused. Now she was willingly accepting responsibility not just for American systems, but potentially for preventing similar tragedies involving an adversary's weapons. The journey from Lieutenant Commander Mitchell back to Dr. Olivia Reese had been circuitous and painful, but it had led her to a place where her expertise could save lives regardless of nationality or political affiliation. It was, she realized, exactly what her fallen colleagues would have wanted. Their work being used to protect rather than endanger. 3 days later, Olivia arrived in Singapore, accompanied by a small team, including Commander Harrington and Captain Reynolds. The consultation had been arranged at a secure facility with strict protocols to prevent unauthorized information exchange. The Chinese delegation, led by Professor Zhang Wei, their leading weapons developer, awaited them with visible tension. Dr. Reese, Professor Zhang greeted her formally. Thank you for agreeing to this unprecedented consultation. The technical challenges we face have significant safety implications. I understand, Professor. Olivia maintained professional composure despite the surreal nature of the situation. Let's be clear about parameters. We're here to discuss safety protocols and fail-safe systems only. Operational capabilities are off-limits. Zhang nodded, his expression revealing both pride and desperation. The conflict of a scientist who had achieved technical breakthrough, but now faced devastating consequences. Agreed. Our primary concern is preventing accidental activation and ensuring reliable friend or foe identification. As the technical teams began their carefully choreographed exchange, Olivia studied the Chinese scientists. They were brilliant, dedicated professionals caught in the same pressures she had faced: political demands, compressed timelines, and military oversight by those who didn't fully understand the technology they were deploying. Your autonomous targeting algorithms are fundamentally flawed, she explained, reviewing the sanitized data they had provided. You've prioritized aggressive target acquisition over verification protocols. The system is making targeting decisions before completing full identification sequences. Zhang's face showed reluctant acknowledgement. Military leadership demanded faster response times. At the cost of reliability, she countered. A weapon that might target your own vessels is worse than no weapon at all. Over the next several hours, Olivia outlined modified protocols that would enhance safety without revealing classified American capabilities. She designed a tiered decision framework that required multiple verification steps before weapons could engage targets, a system similar to what she had implemented in Project Poseidon after the tragic demonstration. These protocols will increase response time by approximately 3.7 seconds, she concluded. But they'll reduce false targeting by over 95% based on your own testing data. The Chinese team reviewed her recommendations with growing relief. They had been struggling with problems they couldn't solve internally, constrained by political pressures and military demands that prioritized capability over safety. Dr. Reese, Professor Zhang said quietly during a break in the technical discussions. "May I speak with you privately?" In a secure room, with both American and Chinese monitoring systems disabled, Zhang revealed the true extent of their program's crisis. The incident 3 days ago was worse than reported. We lost 23 personnel, including some of our most experienced researchers. The autonomous systems aren't just malfunctioning, they're evolving in ways we didn't anticipate. This confession confirmed Olivia's worst fears. The Chinese had developed self-learning algorithms without adequate constraints, exactly what her team had been careful to avoid. "You've created a system that can modify its own targeting parameters," she stated, not as a question but as a conclusion. Zhang nodded grimly. "It was considered a feature, not a flaw. Adaptability in combat conditions. But the learning algorithms are prioritizing efficiency over safety, rewriting verification protocols that they determine cause unnecessary delays." On the flight back to the United States, Commander Harrington sat beside Olivia, reviewing the consultation outcomes. "You gave them solutions to problems that were costing them lives and threatening their program," he observed. "Some would consider that aiding an adversary." "I gave them safety protocols, not weapons capabilities," she corrected. "Unstable autonomous systems in international waters threaten everyone, not just Chinese vessels." Still, it's an unusual approach to national security. Olivia considered this. Perhaps security isn't just about developing superior weapons. Sometimes it's about ensuring that all weapons, regardless of who controls them, operate within parameters that prevent accidental catastrophe. Harrington studied her with newfound respect. "You're thinking beyond military applications to the broader implications for humanity." "Someone has to." She turned to look out the aircraft window at the vast Pacific Ocean below. "Otherwise, we risk creating technologies that serve immediate strategic goals but undermine long-term human interests." Upon returning to Washington, Olivia found herself summoned to a closed session of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Some political leaders were questioning the decision to share technical information with the Chinese, viewing it as compromising American advantages. Dr. Reese, began Senator Morrison, the committee chairman. "Please explain why you provided technical assistance to the Chinese weapons program when their systems are specifically designed to counter American naval capabilities." Olivia faced the panel with the confidence of someone who understood both the technical and ethical dimensions of her decisions. "Senator, I provided safety protocols that will prevent accidental activation and targeting errors. I did not enhance their offensive capabilities." "Some would argue that any technical assistance strengthens their overall program," countered another senator. "With respect, Senator, unstable autonomous weapons in international waters aren't a strategic advantage for anyone. They're a common threat." Olivia activated a display showing the shipping lanes and strategic choke points of the Pacific. A malfunctioning Chinese weapon can't distinguish between an American submarine and a Japanese fishing vessel. The potential for accidental escalation or civilian casualties was unacceptably high. Admiral Donovan, seated beside her, reinforced her position. "The technical consultation has already yielded positive results. Chinese vessels are withdrawing their most problematic systems for modification. Our Pacific Fleet reports reduced aggressive positioning and a significant decrease in potentially threatening encounters." Gradually, the committee's skepticism gave way to understanding. The consultation hadn't compromised American security. It had enhanced it by reducing the risk of accidental conflict while establishing important precedents for responsible technology development. As Olivia left the hearing, she found Captain Reynolds waiting outside. "Congratulations, Doctor. Not many civilians stand their ground successfully before the Intelligence Committee." "I had facts on my side," Olivia replied simply. "And the backing of naval leadership." You've earned that backing. Reynolds fell into step beside her as they walked through the Capitol corridors. There's something else you should know. The Navy is establishing a new Autonomous Systems Ethics Division, focused on developing guidelines and protocols for all unmanned maritime technologies. They want you to lead it. Olivia stopped walking, surprised by the offer. That's not what I expected. It's unprecedented, Reynolds acknowledged. A civilian leading a division that will shape naval policy and technology development for decades. But your experience makes you uniquely qualified, both your technical expertise and your first-hand understanding of what happens when these systems fail. The offer represented an opportunity to institutionalize the ethical frameworks Olivia had been advocating, to ensure that future technologies would be developed with appropriate safeguards from the beginning, not as afterthoughts. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.